Good evening and welcome to the Greg Thompson Sports Show. You are joining us tonight on this free agency eve, about to kick off with one of the busiest sets of days in the NFL calendar. Every single fan base refreshing Twitter over and over again, getting alerts from Adam Schefter. Remember, don't get got by those fake accounts. You got to make sure that you're following the real ones. All the moves all over the league, a pretty good flurry of transactions going on today. But for this week, we thought we'd do a quick show to get some folks together who know the cap really well, who know the Buffalo Bills. We'll talk a little bit about the craziness last Wednesday and do a little bit of preview of what we expect to see this coming week. So without further ado, I will bring on my friend Sara Larson from Buffalo Rumblings. Maybe. There we go. There we go. Sara, Kevin from Bill Buffalo, and our own Chris Seth. How are we doing, guys?
I'm good. Thank you.
One of my favorite nights of the year, Greg. I'm doing well.
It's almost here. It's almost here.
That's right.
Something to live up for.
So, when obviously I think all of us had some similar ranges of moves that we expected, things that could happen. For anybody listening, I specifically asked Kevin and Sara because I think they're two of the better folks in Bills Mafia as far as understanding the salary cap and projecting some of the contracts and the financial side of things. And when you get into that world and start to understand it, sometimes it almost limits the options because you understand enough. They're like, yeah, I know people talk about this, but it's really not going to happen because of X, Y, and Z. You're like, hey, that sounds great, but it's probably not going to happen that way because you need to do that. And there was a pretty finite list of options Brandon Beane had available. Like, hey, here's the handful of contracts you could restructure. Here's the handful you could try to extend. Here's the guys you could leverage for a pay cut or to threaten to release them. And they're not that big of lists on each one. Even with all of that, I listed all the guys who they had that leverage on. I didn't expect them to release all of them, like every single one of the guys that they had any leverage on. So I'll start with you, Sara. Looking back on what's now been dubbed kind of Black Wednesday, which move shocked you the most out of the ones that we saw there?
To be honest, nothing really shocked me. I think that at the end of January, I went through the cap. We did a quick overview on our show with me and Jerry, and I kind of suggested something similar for most of them. I said there's a possibility of letting them go or redoing, asking them to take a pay cut. We all know that most people are not going to be willing to take the pay cut. But I guess if I had to pick one, I would probably say Morse, just because we just traded Bates. So that kind of surprised me the most. I would think the second one would be Trey, just because of how big his dead cap hit is. Even though we did a post, June 1st designation on him, it's still 10 million plus. It's a big hit.
Kevin, how about you?
It's Trey, because I talked about all off season that he was useful to work with the cap on his. I thought the $6 million wasn't that much. I thought they could get around it. I thought they could redo it, maybe get a cut in there, extend some money out. But I think there's more injury related with him than we know. And I think that ultimately, I'm not 100% sure that was just like an age cap hit thing. There may be some things going on there, but I think Trey still shocked me because what Sean McDermott wants at the cornerback position, he's just a staple. He's still not that old, and he just plays super well when he's on the field. The play he got hurt on, he was locking up Tyreek Hill. So ultimately, that one shocked me. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel with Morris, honestly, with the money saved and the age and the concussions. But Trey shocked me. I really thought they'd want him to have a really complete and really studly-like corner room.
So, Chris, I just saw your sub description of Red Wedding Survivor. That's fantastic. Was there any outside of Morris or Trey that really caught you by surprise?
Yeah, and so I just wanted to add a couple things to what Sara had mentioned with Mitch, because that was really the most surprising to me. But because Trey had some injury concerns, obviously going in there, and folks might have had injury concerns with Morse too. His concussions got talked about a lot, and I think that was a real issue for him personally. Family life after football stuff. But like just one note in that, like he played 77 out of 82 games for the Bills.
Way more than people expected, especially
Yeah.
after that moment, the Arizona game where everybody kind of debated, was he sitting or did he have to be out?
Yeah.
And to think from that point forward, it might have even been like one missed game after that.
Right.
And to be honest with you, Greg, I would have thought this last year more of moving on from Morris, but he had a really good year, health wise. So it just shocked me.
Yeah. And Morse is one of my favorite guys on the team.
Super easy to root for.
So yeah, absolutely. And I've got that similar dad energy, I think. So
one of my favorite things to remind dear friend of the network, Nate Geary, of is that he's a month older than Mitch Morris. It's my favorite thing to remind Nate of.
It's beautiful.
Mitch looks
beautiful.
Mitch looks a lot older than he is. So.
Mitch looks like Nate's dad, and Nate's actually a month older than him.
But ultimately, sorry, go ahead.
No, yes, so you guys were all in the same range that I was with those guys. I'll cheat and go a little bit off the board. I still can't believe Von Miller gave money back. Like
that's my next question.
I'm gonna assume that I've heard a couple people speculate some things that there's some dot connecting on. Does that mean that the Bills thought they might have had a case to negate some of the guarantees, or that maybe some form of settlement was upcoming that would have then given them an opening to try to go back after some of the guarantees? Obviously that's pure speculation. That's just people speculating that. Why else would Von do this unless there was something else out there we don't know about? I did talk with Aaron on Wednesday night that if there's any person that you're going to talk into, hey, let's convert a bunch of that money into incentives because you're going to come back 100% and earn all that money back and more anyways, he's the person that would like manifest that and be able to convince himself to do that. But I still couldn't get over, like when it first happened, I was like, oh my God, I hope this isn't a restructure. I hope this isn't kicking the can down the road and then we're married for like, is it 2 more seasons or what is it? And then as more of the details come out, it was, holy crap, this is just a pay cut. Like this is just him converting stuff over. And then I know our guy Yards Per Pass was like, yeah, but hey, let's wait and see the incentives. They could be like super, super low because he had 0 sacks, 5 tackles. Like those are incredibly easy things to surpass. So then when the details came out, they're like, yeah, a little bit of it isn't bad, but for like, I think 6 million to get up to 6 million is like 8.5 sacks. And then to actually get the money back, he needs 10.5. And that if he gets and he could earn more, it's 15 sacks and leading us to a Super Bowl. Like, okay, if he gets 15 sacks on our way to the Super Bowl, I'll chip in some extra money from my account. That's totally fine. You can have all the money back. So I just, as more of those details came out, I joke with Aaron all the time. Like my brain is 2 completely separate things. Like I can't turn off the pragmatic financial side, but I'm very sentimental. Like I didn't want to cut Mitch Morris. I didn't want to cut Trey.
Right.
Like I spent so much time rooting for them. I listed them because the math is the math. Like,
well, I know Poyer I know Poyer's family, and I'm very close with Poyer's family. So it was very hard for me to say, he's a cut candidate if he's not going to, if he's not going to accept a lower pay. And I feel guilty even saying it because of how much he puts himself out there every week.
We were joking pre-show, the video today, like where you can see like his shoulder is hanging like a half inch lower than where it should be because of all the AC.
It's terrible. I feel so bad for him and the family, but I mean, that's the business side of it.
He was a shocker too. Like we didn't talk about him, but honest, I really thought he'd be like, they have no safeties. So I honestly thought some of those rooms, corner, even interior line a little bit, like has some players. They don't have
last year the plan. Yeah, last year the plan looked like, okay, we're going to stagger the departures, right? Like expecting Jordan to be gone and we'll have Micah for a year transition. And then you just kind of assume, okay, this year is going to be the flip of that. Micah looks like he's retiring. Okay, we'll have Jordan for the last year of this deal and we'll transition that way.
Yeah.
And now they're just both going to be gone. Like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The continuity that we had for so long in that secondary was such an easy thing to take for granted, and just such a nice, pardon the pun, like safety blanket of like, oh, well, we have Trey and Jordan and Micah back there. It's fine. Everything's going to be fine. Like, oh, that's all right. We can mess around with other things. And now, like, I've caught myself a couple times being like, oh wow, like Taron Johnson's the only one left, and now it's like Rasul Douglas came in, and it was, oh, there's all these existing tribal knowledge, like elder statesmen in the secondary room, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, now it's like Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford and Taron Johnson and some other people to be named. Like, we'll find
Yeah.
out who else it is. It's pretty wild. Let's flip to the other side of that. We'll start with you, Kevin, on this one. Given how many moves did happen, was there one that surprised you that it didn't happen? Was there one more hanging out there like, oh, I thought they might have also done this? What was one that maybe surprised you it didn't happen?
I was thinking that I'm going to cheat a little bit with the Douglas deal because I thought that they would do something there other than restructure it. It was not on my cards that's how they would handle that with some void years. So certainly was like not. I thought that was a shoe in that. And then he started tweeting a little bit, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And then obviously, we'll see what happens. But Deion Dawkins, like I thought. So I'm gonna pick from the extension category here. I just thought he would kind of be a left tackle for life. But then when you kind of think of the cards of, what's his age and what, kind of their grandiose decisions here, it kind of makes you think a little bit, but I just can't see them creating a left tackle hole anytime soon. So it's really, I'm going to cheat from the extensions category there because I had those two. And even Taron. So it's the extensions. I thought they'd get one done. But they still very, very likely might.
If you look at previous years, that group of like still a year left, like obviously they did the Milano deal right before the deadline. They did multiple others that were pending free agency. The group that had the 1 year left where there's benefit from it, a lot of those happened, but a lot of them were over the summer. Some even like training camp and stuff like that. Terrence was into the season. Dawson Knox was just before the season. There was quite a few. Ed Oliver's was later into the summer. There was quite a few where it was a little bit later. So I think a lot of us have the number in mind of like, oh, if we do all of this now, it gives us this much for like shopping list money to have of, oh, we can now go on a shopping spree. And I think maybe Bean has a different number in mind of what he actually needs. And then as those other things come up, he can add to it as he goes. We'll see. I don't think it's off the table. I think maybe Douglas, I was in your camp. I probably jumped the gun a little bit. Now, as I saw it happen, I'm like, well, he is going to be 30. He is under contract at a fair number. It's probably not the worst thing in the world to see if that works under an entire training camp and through a whole season when you could then still extend him then anyways. It's probably not terrible to do that, but I kind of expected it too. Chris, how about you? Anything that didn't happen that you were kind of thinking could or that you would have put next on the list?
Yeah, and this might have already happened, and we just haven't gotten word of it. But I'm still expecting the Diggs restructure to happen. I'm surprised that hasn't gone down. When we talked about the salary cap earlier, in the winter, we essentially said that the Allen restructure and the Diggs restructure virtually have to happen just to function. Now, maybe what we saw on Black Wednesday is akin to the record-setting dead cap hit from 2019, and we're getting a Band-Aid ripped off in order to have financial flexibility, 2024 and beyond. Sorry, 2025 and beyond, and so maybe he's not looking to push any more Diggs money down the road, but just in terms of sheer functionality, I'm still expecting that Diggs restructure to happen.
Sarah, how about you?
We're still about what, 13 million over ish.
So, there's a couple things. A lot of folks asking. Sal Capaccio has reported that the Josh Allen one is happening. It has to. There are a lot of other things on that list that are like debatable, and I do think how drastic the moves Wednesday were makes the Stephon Diggs from kind of a must-have to function to now debatable. Like,
Yeah.
you could hold off
Right.
because we did enough other things. They don't have to pull that lever.
Right.
You have to with Josh. Like, we can't
Yeah.
function without it. Like, you can't do this. I know very early on, the NFLPA put out a number where there had been a drop in the how far under they were, and I kind of reverse engineered it, and I'm like, well, if you add together Connor McGovern and Ed Oliver, it comes down to the 7.1 that they went down. And then Connor McGovern's got reported, but it's by his agent. And now we've heard about Rasul Douglas. The team didn't report any of those. The team doesn't have to report restructures. They just submit the paperwork, and they don't have to submit the paperwork until technically Wednesday at 4:00. So all of those things, I'm 99% sure Ed Oliver has been restructured. I'm 100% sure Josh Allen has been restructured. I don't know what other pieces haven't happened yet that we just don't know about, because unfortunately they don't give a crap about our curiosity. They don't care that we really want to know. They don't need to. So they are cap compliant. Like,
well, you have to
way
be
overboard on the things. Everyone will be cap compliant. It's not an option not to be.
Yeah.
We just don't know how much. We don't know how much space they're going to have.
Yeah, I was only asking just to see if I had missed anything, but
that's the number publicly available. Same. I see the same thing.
Yeah. So as of right now, I kind of feel it's the same thing. I actually had Rasul Douglas as my biggest surprise that we didn't extend him. That we just restructured. I do get his age, and we're all getting a little concerned there now. I feel like 30 is the cutoff for certain. For certain positions, that they're pretty much putting that 30-year-old cutoff. So I would say him. Dawkins, I feel like, if we don't extend him, I'll be surprised. I don't feel like
Especially
we have
tackles age well. That's not one that falls off the cliff like others.
I feel like the one thing that we had going for us last year was the health of our offensive line and the consistency that we had through our offensive line. And we've already disrupted that a little bit. Obviously with letting Morris go. And then, even though Bates only saw not even 30% of the snaps last year, he was still in our, locker room for the last couple of years. So I feel like there's already a big, change. So I think that Diggs or that Dawkins is going to get extended. I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, but if they don't extend them, they're going to restructure them. I think that, that is money that they need as well. I think that Diggs, they want to hold off until the last moment that they possibly can because of his age. They don't want to push too much of it down the line. So if they can wait to restructure him and know how much money they need from him, they can kind of restructure it in a smart way.
Yeah, I'm torn on it because, and when we did it on our salary cap show with the Cover One panel, it was assuming more of the guys who got released Wednesday would be pay cuts, and that if you did the lesser amount of those savings, it was one of those things where, well, technically we can get under the cap, but with barely enough for the draft picks and Brandon Bean's $1.77 million special and like little moves like that. But without it, at that point, without Diggs restructure, you couldn't bring back a Daquan Jones. You couldn't go sign a Leonard Floyd type pass rusher. It was just to be functional. So then once they did the maximum, and it was all 8.5 million on Mitch Morris, and it'll be 10 million on Trey White once we get it. It does open up the option there. And I do wonder if now maybe Diggs is like, I think they did a small one with Dawkins when we went to trade for Rasul Douglas last year, where all of a sudden it's, hey, we need to shuffle around a little bit here to make a move in season. Maybe they wait, and that, hey, if there isn't a trade deadline move, we don't do anything with Diggs, and that, he is pretty locked in here for the next 2 seasons, but in theory you could get out of it painfully next year. If you restructure, it is 100% locked in for this year and next year, and then it's even kind of painful in 2026. So I do think it's prudent to hold there. You guys touched off on all the ones that I had in looking at it. I don't think those extensions are off the table, especially I think Taron Johnson is a formality. That one I feel very, very confident in. I feel highly confident in Deion Dawkins. I think that's still very likely to happen. I'll share. Eric might yell at me. We don't know. Sometimes, obviously, like you guys, we have some contacts with players and things here or there. So sometimes we know what's happening or not happening. We have no idea what the heck Deion meant with his IG post and some of the other pieces that are out there. Tua just signed for 5 years, $275 million. John, if you just
man,
if
I wish it was
that's
3.
not
I wish
real,
it was 300.
that's amazing. $55 million a year is
Woo!
just such a
Holy
fabulous
For
number.
Tua.
Congratulations, Tua.
Way to
Good
go,
for
the
you.
Dolphins.
That is awesome.
Congratulations, Chris Greer, everybody. Y'all are
Just great job,
Is it
everyone.
terrible that we all wanted that? The more money, the
Right,
better for
exactly.
Tua.
Fantastic. Oh, it's fantastic.
Exactly.
Anyway, let me get my mind back on track here.
Sorry, I know that was a
that
distraction,
that
but
was
I
worth
thought
bringing
that
up.
we
That was
had to look
fantastic.
at that one. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. So when you're looking at that stuff, like I still, our speculation is that maybe they did kind of trade some extension numbers back and forth, and it didn't come to the quick agreement that they thought it would, which doesn't mean it won't. Like, if that still
Right.
could happen later this summer, that maybe that's kind of what his post meant, was like, hey, I'm always going to consider Buffalo home, because it like didn't come together immediately the way they thought. That, like, that's purely just us guessing.
Oh, I'm sure his agent said,
yeah.
let's stick it to him a little bit.
Twist the knife a little bit. We'll see where that goes. And again, I was just like you guys. Rasul Douglas looked awesome, and I'm very excited he's on the team this year. But he is going to be 30. That is a thing at cornerback. I don't think it's crazy to want to see that. And I would love to see, week 4, we announced that, we've reached an extension with Rasul Douglas, because he looks great in camp and is playing well at the same level he was before. So I think that's very, very strong in that position. Chris, we'll lead you off on this one, although I think you might have already shared your answer with us on the other forum. Which still unsigned Bills free agent do you most want back?
Yeah,
there is a leader in the
Tiquan.
clubhouse for most of these responses.
Yeah, it's Tiquan. Like, and this one, like, he's also the starter I want to see from free agency too for the next question. But it's Tiquan. It's through and through in Tiquan. Like, when he went down, he was 8th in pass rush productivity. The metric from PFF that focuses on pass rush ability, particularly on sacks. He was 8th out of all defensive tackles in that, and he was 9th in average depth of tackle. At 0.9 yards, and so he was a top 10 pass rusher and run stopper, and honestly, he seemed even quicker at the start of this season. Like the Washington game, his get off, it was either learning old vet wily tricks and like anticipating the snap count at a phenomenally lucky rate, or he was just lightning quick to a degree that I didn't remember seeing from him the year before. So yeah, I'm not worried about the age for the position that he's at. And yeah, like you had guessed, in that range of 2 years for it, I think it was 16 million with 8 million guaranteed, and I'll take that. I'll take that.
Sarah, how about you? Was there anyone on the list yet that we haven't brought back, or was David Edwards already the top of your list?
No, he definitely was not. But I'm glad that we brought him back. I just that was a little bit of a surprise to kind of put him into the starting role for me and to move McGovern over. But Daquan was obviously my number one as well. But I actually kind of want to see Dotson come back, which was hard for me to admit, because prior to this year, he frustrated the heck out of me all the time. But this year, I feel like we had so many issues with linebackers, going down, that I'm afraid that the depth isn't going to be there this year. So I'd really like to see Dotson come back, and I kind of have him a smidge in front of Epinesa. But those were my 1 through 3.
I went as far as to say he's the perfect player for that role. Like, I don't, with having Bernard and Milano back and just needing him as the third linebacker, which you only bring in for heavy sets, short yardage, goal line, coming downhill, going forward. That's what he's good at. He's really good on special teams. he's nice when you want to play games with a third safety or with another nickel or other things. And like I expect him to get paid. Some team like Atlanta or Arizona is going to throw him, $6 or $8 million a year to go be their starter, which God bless him. That's great for
Right.
him. But if he doesn't get that, I would welcome him back. I actually poked around while Chris was talking.
Mhm.
I think that
Yeah.
guy got, and by that I think
Ah,
I got
man.
got.
Or we got got.
I don't
we
think
just got
the
got.
news was real.
Ah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to go back and find John. You get put in timeout now. But I do agree that sneakily, and I had to apologize because I was very critical of Terrell in previous play. He acquitted himself really well, and
Yeah.
also kudos to the defensive coaches finding a role that made sense with him and realizing, hey, we can do this swap with Poyer coming into the box as the kind of dime linebacker in those obvious passing sets. A lot of coaches aren't great at that, and that's not something we've always done all that well. So finding that, like, hey, he could be really good in that role and not jeopardize himself in the other role was just, good decision making, and he flourished in that role. How about you, Kev?
I'm gonna follow the kind of trend they're setting here. I'm going with AJ Epinesa. I think that he matches what they're doing, their age range, second contract. I think you could probably get him on a bridge deal. I have some good numbers I'm thinking that he could sign at. I think keeping him in that 5 to 7 sack range keeps him somewhere on planet Earth. And just knowing he does love the Buffalo area, he actually stays here full time. He is a full-term resident of Buffalo. So I think that there's some heavy, good synergy there. So I'm going with, I think that, and on top of it, they need more DNs, and I think that would really help. And I love a lot of rookie DTs in the draft if we have to go that route. But I think AJ Epinesa makes a ton of sense as a contingency to Vaughn.
And let's talk a little bit. We were talking pre-show with that point you just made there, Kevin, that, people ask, I'm sure you guys as well, questions about, the Chargers are making Khalil Mack or Keenan Allen available, or, the Broncos cut Justin Simmons. And there was a time where those are the perfect kind of players the Bills were going after. It was like, accomplished guys who have already made a bunch of money and might be willing to play for a little bit lesser deal. And hey, let's tack them on because we're already kind of pushing all those chips in. I gotta say, if we made all the moves that we did Wednesday, and there was there's a lot of folks from an analytical and financial standpoint who can say those were obvious moves that we had to make, but they were painful. Those were players that a lot of fans cared a lot about, that locker room cared a lot about. There's a lot of leadership that walked out that door, and you can't always put a dollar figure on leadership or on the locker room mentality. But if we did all that and lost what we lost on Wednesday and then turn around and give expensive contracts to other 30-year-olds or other older guys, that would be really weird. So I hadn't connected it, like reverse engineering it like that, Kevin, to say, does that now increase the likelihood of AJ Epinesa being retained? And obviously that's purely based on what's his market and what else are people offering. Somebody wants to offer him $10 million a year. God bless him, go get that money. But if it's not, maybe that does increase the, draft, develop, and retain that you hear Brandon Beane talk about so often in being able to put that together. That's an interesting way to look at it. I like that.
Yeah.
Sarah, let's start with you on this one. Which position do you now, seeing what we've seen, seeing the little bit of movement in that, hey, we plugged a hole with the backup quarterback, and thank God he was cheap. We brought back some competition at guard. I like the phrasing I heard for David Edwards that he will be set up to compete to start, which I think is fair, that he deserves to compete for that. He did start every single game for the Rams in their Super Bowl season. So obviously a team can win a Super Bowl with David Edwards as a starter. That's obviously on the table. Taylor Rapp, I think, is similar. Like David Edwards and Taylor Rapp's contracts are very similar, where if they get beat out for starting spots, it's not detrimental. If they do start, they have incentives where they can earn enough money where you're okay because you're paying them like a starter. So they're actually structured very intelligently to me, but they filled a couple initial gaps there. With that in mind, which position do you most want to see them shop for a starter in free agency, where it's not just maybe a backup or depth, but like, hey, maybe we could plug in a starter at this spot.
Safety, easily. I think there's so many safeties that are available this year. I think that the first couple will come off the board probably a little bit more than we're willing to spend, especially considering we just got we just let go of Poyer. But I think that once those few come off the board and prices start to come down, same thing with what happened last year with Poyer coming back. I think something similar will happen this year, not with Poyer coming back, obviously, but there'll be a couple of safeties out there that we never thought would have been available for the price that we can offer. But that's why I don't really see us doing much this week. And I know I joked with you about it earlier. I was like, I don't even know really what position to look at. The only positions I really looked at so far is safety, because I just don't see us spending right off the bat, because we don't even know how much money we have yet.
Yeah, correct. We literally might not know until Wednesday at 4 o'clock. Like we really might not know until then. So quick aside before I go to Kevin, the first one that we saw today, Kevin Byard signed with the Bears.
The Bears,
2 years, 15 million, 7.5. It's maybe a tiny bit more than I would have guessed for him. I might have guessed like 2 years, 12 million, which maybe when the details come in, maybe that's actually what the deal is, and it's up to 15 million. I might have guessed him closer to 6, but that was maybe my opinion of that was, that's probably a good job by Byard and his agent if that's what was on the table, to snag that in the, hey, that's a pretty good number, especially how many safeties we saw float out there forever last year. It's a flooded market that was very deflated last year, and now there's a ton of options. The Bills, if Brandon Beane plays it right and can just wait and see who loses musical chairs here, you might stumble into somebody pretty darn good at a pretty good value. Kevin, obviously, I assume that would have been one on your list. Is that where you double down, or is there another one that you see as an option?
Yeah, safety was very high on my list. I just think the only reason maybe I took it a tick lower was because of the options. Like, I don't think you have to panic there. I think between the draft and maybe the 10 million from Trey coming, I think maybe you can weight that a little bit based on the market and get a really good deal. And see how it plays
one
out.
That could be, we see that veteran free agent pass rusher market always waits into the summer. Maybe there's a pool of safeties that waits beyond the comp pick window or even after the draft, and you can see how that goes. There's so many out there. There might be some waiting that long.
The comp pick window is what, May 2nd?
Yeah, it changed. It's usually X amount of days after the draft of what's there. So May 2nd sounds right. It's that ballpark. It's that first week of May. And they'll usually wait until right there. It's usually a couple days after the draft.
And apparently they make up comp pick rules anyways.
Yeah, apparently none of us know how comp picks work anyways. So,
so whatever they want.
Oh god,
it's completely arbitrary. They change it whatever they want. Like, who knows?
They can't. They set the bars. Who knows?
Yeah, and just for anybody listening, the compensatory pick formula legitimately is a secret. Like, no one actually knows exactly what it was. Based on the results of 20 years worth of data, some folks led by Nick Corte over the Cap reverse engineered it to know within like 98-99% of, hey, this is how it works. All of a sudden, and it was specifically last year when they introduced the minority coach or front office executive promotion incentive that they did, it started to tweak a little bit, and there were some gaps of like, oh, we kind of expected that to be at this level, and that was pushed down to this level. And then this year, Nick kind of lost his mind for a minute in a thread and like outright accused the NFL of doing the math wrong.
Tell Nick to respond to me, because I asked him a question, because I could say that I had thought that I knew what the exact way the formula went. And even the way he explained it, I was like, well, wait a second. This is a little different than I had assumed. So ask him to reply to me.
I'll see if I can help. And just to let people know, his math previously was spot on, because they knew down to the exact one. And he had actually gone 5 or 6 years in a row without missing a single one. He had every single peg right down to the one. The last 2 years, it shifted a little bit. This year, dramatically differently, where Jimmy Garoppolo was actually a good chunk above Tremaine Edmonds. He was $25 million, and he was also a 4th round pick. So there was a bunch of big shifts in where it was, and we don't know part of it is, hey, the third round one is the top 5% of contracts, and the NFL could have changed that to 2.5 or 3% and just not told anyone,
Told us,
and we
yeah.
just don't know that. But that's the hard part about having a process like this. So when you saw a bunch of people excited about comp picks and then very frustrated, it's because we don't know, and we don't know why it changed, and they're probably not going to tell us, and that's really annoying.
Yeah.
Anyways,
and the stupid
random
playing
rant
time
aside.
kicker ttoo, like because he
Yes,
only
correct.
played 81%.
Was his 81% of snaps an issue, or
It's bizarre.
Could
but
they have tweaked how big of a part of the equation that is versus just the contract?
Weirdness there, but I'm going DN to the original question. I think
like
that I need to land a starter there. I don't need to overspend. But I don't love what I'm looking at in the draft. I'd like to go in with that checked off, as Brandon Bean likes to do. And I just am staring at some really good budget level, medium level defensive ends. I think that would fit in a McDermott scheme, and maybe Bobby Babich. So I think that's where I'm headed, because I think he can get a $4 or $5 million guy that comes in and is pretty effective and cleans up sacks from the interior with Ed Oliver. So I'm going there, and I just need that depth behind Von Miller right now with 0 sacks. So that's the one I'd like to check off the board, at least heading into the draft.
Yeah, and especially you look at how much of a premium those can push for in the draft, and what that can do. Obviously, we know guys like Jonathan Grenard and Brian Burns and people like that are going to get paid a boatload, but there actually is a reasonable group, like you talked about. I'll leave some of the names off in case somebody brings them up on the next question. But there are some reasonable options that are available. Chris, anything different besides safety or defensive end that was on your list?
Defensive tackle. I was going to cheat and go defensive line, because who do we have playing on the defensive line?
Ed Oliver. I can confirm we have Ed Oliver.
Von Miller.
We have 2 of them. Technically, Von Miller.
Eli Anko?
Yeah, Eli Anko.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think
maybe
Cameron Klein's ready. We'll see.
Yeah. I think by default, we're going to end up with a starter from free agency in there, along the defensive line. So, but I also think there's a number of players at defensive tackle that can fit that bargain bin that we're probably going to end up playing in still, even after, Black Wednesday, that, and considering, just how few players the Bills have there period right now, that defensive tackle seems a pretty easy bet to say, yeah, there's probably a starter coming from there, and it should be Daquan Jones. So
I like it. I will add in, obviously there's appreciate I've got some folks jumping in here, Cincinnati, from Cincinnati, listening there, so appreciate him. There's I do think safety is the best fit of need and deflated market. That one I think makes a ton of sense. Defensive end can be tricky, because some get paid a ton and we don't always understand why, and teams get really, really, thirsty for pass rushers. That can get a little bit crazy. I think we're fortunate that Ed Oliver is the one that's locked up, because maybe the second, probably third behind running back, but safety and running back, one of the next most affordable markets is the one tech side of D tackle. So that's another spot where, hey, that's the spot we need. There are some options out there. Honestly, a lot of the names that got thrown around with the fire sale going on in Denver right now, the sexier names, Jerry Jeudy got traded. People want Cortland Sutton.
Jones.
People want Justin Simmons. If they're giving away DJ Jones, I'll take him. Like, you can send him, his large body, and come stick him over here at one tech. He's basically a 28-year-old version of Daquan Jones. I'll take that. Bring him on over here. So I think one tech has a case to be made. And honestly, I know there's a reason for the fervor behind all of the, take a receiver at pick 28, take a receiver at pick 28. I don't mind the idea of having at least a baseline outside starter in free agency. And I'll save some of the names that I'll probably bring up here in the next question. It doesn't have to be someone flashy. I don't think it's going to be a Marquise Brown. It's not going to be a Calvin Ridley. But having someone functional in the sense of when we had Emmanuel Sanders and didn't have to rush Gabe Davis, or had John Brown and has some of the, you can have someone who can take some of the pressure off, where if the best guy on the board at 28 is a defensive tackle, that's okay. and you can still take a really good receiver at 60. Like I still want a premium investment at receiver, but I'd love to go into the draft having someone functional there. And starter is a debatable term of what that means, but like someone who can be a playable player, more than Trent Sherfield, more than what Deontay Hardy ended up being, but maybe the kind of signing that Deontay Hardy was, where it's, hey, it's $5 million. Like we're expecting some play out of this person. I don't think that's a bad spot to look at. And I actually think there's a market there at some of the receivers. There's obviously some shiny ones that look nice, but in that next tier down, there's some guys who I think can come in and play and be able to look at it that route. And that leads us into one of our final kind of prep questions here for the show. We'll just kind of go around, and I'll go around everybody till we exhaust everybody's list. And we'll go through just what your wish list of free agents are. Like who's somebody that you think has the right fit of need, value, maybe age is a factor, what kind of contract you think they'd get, and why they would be a target for you. Kevin, I'll let you kick off for this one. Who is the first guy off your wish list that you'd like to see the Bills go after here in the next couple of days?
It's funny because I just said D-end, but the first guy on my wish list is Darnell Savage. I think he fits the mold. I think he fits the price point. The problem for me with like Chin, we don't know what he's going to get paid. Like PFF and Over the Cap have him at $3 million. If that's it, okay, right now.
I will say, if I watch another team sign Jeremy Chin for $3 million, I will lose my mind. If he signs somewhere for $10 million, I'm like, all right, God bless him. Go get some money. That's great. Yeah. Go get it. That's totally fine. If he signs somewhere else for $3 million, I will lose my ever-loving mind.
And the synergy with Douglas for me, I think you can have him. I looking at some numbers, I think you can put Savage down for a cap hit this year of around 4. So I think it works. I think he's a starting free safety. It works. I think he would be good in the scheme. I think the age is right.
Yeah, when there's like an informed opinion in the room, where it's one of those things where if it happens, you can feel pretty good that Rasul Douglas vouched for it. And it's not as simple on the negative side of that. Like if it doesn't happen, it could just be that they didn't agree on numbers, but it also could be that Rasul Douglas is like, nah, you don't want that.
Right.
Sometimes that happens too. Like having informed opinions isn't always like, I get into that with Dean all the time on his list of people we scouted and people that we had a lot of exposure to. And I always try to remind him that, hey, not all exposure is positive. Like sometimes you have all those visits and all those discussions to find out why not to draft a guy. And that's why he's not on our board anymore, because now we have a very informed opinion on the player. Sometimes it's not a very positive one that happens. So Chris, we'll let you go next here. What is a guy on your wish list that you would like to see the Bills target in the next couple days?
Yeah, and so one of the main guys, and this is probably a little more expensive than what I really think the Bills will be able to do, but I think it's within a stretch of a reason, and that's Dorrance Armstrong, defensive end from the Cowboys. And there's just like 26 years old, 6'4", 250, and can generate power to bull rush Lane Johnson and has the speed to chase down Jalen Hurts. Like, I'll take that package. I'll absolutely take that package. And Brad Spielberger at PFF, it has him in the neighborhood of probably around $8.5 million a year. Maybe adding another 4th year onto it, you'd extend it a little further, get it down a little bit. But, he plays everywhere along the defensive line. The Cowboys have used him, a lot at 5. They've used him at 9 a lot too. But then in their Amoeba package, he stands up at the 1. So he's all over the place for them. And that kind of versatility fills in well with the Bills and adds another situational pass rusher that you can't get too deep with, and can provide a little bit more maybe for a full year than Leonard Floyd did.
I like that. I think you talk about the comments on age and transition, but still a similar price range to where Leonard Floyd was, and a different skill set, but still the kind of guy who can contribute in that kind of role in a rotational space. That's the kind of guy you could invest in and have a little bit down the line, maybe akin to what Connor McGovern was last year, where, hey, we're spending a little bit of money here, but we think we're buying on the upswing. We think that there's value to be had here, that if he had gotten consistent snaps all the time, maybe he would have been a $10 or $12 million guy. Or heck, Kevin Dotson just got $16 million. Kevin Dotson wasn't better than Connor McGovern last year, and Connor McGovern's getting paid less than half of that. So, sometimes there's upswing in buying guys when there have been in more limited rotational roles and then moving forward. So, Sarah, I know you have tried to calm and mute some of the fans' expectations of what's coming up here in the next couple days. So what are some of the areas you do think they could go into, or a guy you think they might actually try to go after if it's
well, I
if it's
mean,
here in the next bit?
I don't mind them going. I know I want safety, but there's just so many people that we could potentially go for with safety. I'm not even going to try to touch it. There's a couple people I like. I love Savage. I think that it would be great. To be honest with you, I thought he had 1 year left. So I didn't even realize he was a free agent. So he is a free agent. So with I'm gonna go wide receiver right now, just because my only concern with getting somebody in free agency that we overspend a little bit is that we might not pick high in the draft for a wide receiver, and I feel like we need it. I know there's a lot of people that are like, this is the deepest draft for a wide receiver. I've done so much extensive research. I honestly think that there's probably about 14 guys between first, second, early third round that are all going to make a huge impact. I mean, huge versus huge is it's relative to based on what you think. But I honestly think that there's even going to be some wide receivers in the draft that go undrafted that are going to be a surprise to some people. I've done a lot of wide receiver research for the draft work, but I think that if we could get somebody like Curtis Samuel or Tyler Boyd for under what we would have potentially paid Gabe, which I think, and I know different skill sets. I know that, we're talking Boyd would be a slot receiver, but if we can get it like, under
I do
10.
wonder a little on him. I wonder how much of that was him needing to play the slot and how much of it was, hey, you're on the same team with Jamar Chase and T Higgins. Like I do think in similarly, people think of Deontay Johnson as just a slot receiver. He actually played like 87% of his snaps outside. If he was a Bengal instead of a Sealer, he would have played 87% of his snaps in the slot because you wouldn't put him outside when you have T Higgins and Jamar Chase. So I think Boyd has maybe a little more versatility to be outside than just.
So if we could get one of them, to be honest with you, doing a trade for Deontay Johnson to me makes the most sense because you know what his contract is for the year, and I think it's like $7 or $8 million.
The salary is $7 million. He's got a $3 million roster bonus coming up here on the 8th.
So let Pittsburgh pay that.
Yeah, if we can get Pittsburgh to pay that, all right.
Yeah, and then we but I think that I just feel more comfortable with doing a trade if we could figure out a trade. Unless the wide receiver market isn't what it has been in the past years, but some of these numbers, I was actually surprised because I saw Calvin Ridley. They're kind of estimating around 17 million, and I'm like, if that's no way, there's no way. So I kind of had him around 24, 25 ish. Even though like he's only been back for a year, I still feel like he's gonna the way the wide receiver has been paid, I just felt like he was gonna get paid. So we'll see. I feel like once the first couple come off the board, we'll kind of see what the market value is for everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a spot on range, and I think I've had it in like 2 tiers. So I've had that top tier. If one of these 3 guys lose the musical chairs, Tyler Boyd's one of them. Curtis Samuel was one I had in that group, and Darnell Mooney. If one of those, I think all 3 of those are going to be out of our price range, but they're close enough where if they don't get the offer they think they're going to get, and they're now in the, hey, we got to choose amongst these ones we don't love, all of a sudden, what we never had for 20 years is we now have the offer of like, well, if you're going to take a cheap 1-year deal, do you want to catch passes from this guy? Because that can certainly help inflate a value to be able to get you the contract you want next offseason. So I think that they're in the possible range. I don't think that we'll get a Curtis Samuel, Darnell Mooney, or Tyler Boyd, but it's possible, and it could fall right where that happens. My first choice is going to be that next tier down at receiver. I think it's going to be more likely a Josh Reynolds or a Noah Brown. there's a handful of advanced metrics that Noah Brown looks really, really good every time he gets a chance to play. And like some of it has been in Dallas when they had Michael Gallup go out. He stepped up and played really well. When Nico Collins went out for Houston, he stepped up and played really well. It kind of looks like a guy that if you gave a chance to do there, and if you tell me, he's the kind of guy I'd do 2 years and 12 million, give him like 6 million a year. If you tell me that's possible, that's all of a sudden a guy where, hey, that scenario I talked about with the draft, you could bring him in, have him start week 1, everything's good, and now all of a sudden we take I don't know, Johnny Newton or something at 28. We get a stud defensive tackle, and then we take Javon Baker in the second round. And maybe Baker isn't ready to jump in and start week 1, but as the season goes on, they could all of a sudden become a 2A, 2B, and that, like, hey, they're kind of going back and forth. And if that transitions to where the rookie is ready to play more, Noah Brown's not in a position where he's going to be like, oh man, that's crazy, you can't take my snaps. He's been doing that his whole career. He's been playing back and forth in those different spots. I think that's the kind of guy. I do think there's a little more upside with Brown. I think the more realistic, but also probably less exciting version of that is Josh Reynolds, but I think he does that too. Very willing blocker, is able to run all the routes that we would need, can soak up those starting snaps, can be that kind of, hey, all right, now it's not the biggest hole on the roster. We have someone in there who can play. That at least gives us an option in that realm. So those are the ones I would be one of those two. I'd love if we stumble into a Darnell Mooney. I think there's a lot of advanced metrics that show he's a lot more talented than the quarterbacks that he played with.
Yeah, but the same thing with Jerry
risk to it.
Jeudy, and the same thing with Jerry Jeudy. I really, I like Jerry Jeudy, but look at who he's played with and what offensive coordinators he's had over the years and disruption over the years. So everyone was like, he's not as good as the 5th and 6th round that they dealt for him. But I feel like it's going to be different for him to actually go somewhere. I mean, you got Watson thrown to you. So.
Yeah. The person aside, he's at least got a chance to, play with a more talented player. Kevin, who else do you have left in your list?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on the receivers. So to put a bow on that for me, at least, like I'm all in on Tyler Boyd. I think I was talking to some Cincinnati people with inside, like that cover their team, and they said he was playing slot out of necessity. They think he can bounce outside. He has some snaps to prove it. He's just so sure-handed. Like, I would just love to be on the musical chairs battle with Tyler Boyd. I just think he would be a great player to win contested catches, run smooth routes, to do whatever it takes to be a safety blanket for Joe Burrow first, but then Josh Allen now. So I think that he would come with kind of that pizzazz of like a Emmanuel Sanders. But I like DJ Chark. He's my next guy because I like some of what he can do. The problem I have with Chark is he's always been the guy that everyone's like, he's going to do it this year. He's going to. Like, I'm telling you, it's Chark.
This is the year.
This is the year for his height, weight, speed. Like, he has it. He has it all. Like, everything you want from one of these draft prospects. He really is DJ Chark, but he just never does it. But could he do it? I honestly think he has some good numbers that show he could as well. But a lot of these individuals are journeymen. Like, you're talking about Noah Brown. You're talking about Josh Reynolds. Like, they're all in the same camp of needing a couple of different teams to get it done. They remind me a little of Trent Sherfield, so it makes me a little nervous in that regards. But I think, like, I'd like to buy the potential of Chark, but Mooney would be next for me. But I'm trying to play the battle of that musical chairs too, because I think the Bills have the leverage with the draft and then Josh Allen to pluck one of those individuals out of the receiver unit. So that would cover kind of my receivers list because we were talking about it. But Yetur Gross-Matos is the guy I'm targeting. Yeah. I think that between him and maybe an old pal and he's younger than you think, in Yannick Ngakoue. But that's really where I'm thinking the Bills could go with the defensive end room as well. So that's $4 million is about what I have. And they've been productive. Yannick Ngakoue is just a pass rusher, but he gets it done. Didn't have as great of a year as he normally does. But
it's hard when you're such a mess in that overall defense. It's hard to know how much was him and how much was the system and the usage and some of the weird things they tried to do.
Yeah. So I think that's about where my eyes are headed for the defensive end room. Kind of Chris had some good points, and we do love our mid-tier Cowboys linemen on the contract. So I think that to kind of put a bow on Chris and Sarah, I'm thinking that's where I'm going with my receiver room and then my defensive end room.
So I know for defensive end, a couple others. Chris helped us. Eric and I did a lot of prep with Chris and Dave Tilton going through kind of creating a free agent prep list of guys, and we had a couple others. At first, before we realized how crazy his market was going to be, we were maybe hoping for Jonathan Grenard, and he's going to get a boatload. He's going to get a huge bag. So some guys that I think would be similar to Gross Matos would be maybe an Anthony Jennings. I think would be in that range of maybe not crazy money. He might be able to be a guy that fits in there. I know Eric likes Dante Fowler Jr. And mine, if we did go back to the one spot that I think we might lean a little bit older and it might not be the end of the world, would be on the defensive line, whether it's the defensive tackle or going back like another Leonard Floyd move would be Shaq Barrett, who got released in Tampa. If it's a 1-year deal, the age isn't as big of a factor. I don't think we do long-term deals with some of the older guys, but I think that could be one that could come into play there in the defensive lineman. Chris, anyone left in your list that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I haven't really talked about a safety yet tonight, and the one that we didn't put on our free agent list, for the website, but Jordan Whitehead has a high degree of versatility.
If he plays for us, he can't intercept Josh Allen.
Exactly. That is the perfect joke every time you mention Jordan Whitehead. And it's true too. So funny and true that it's a win-win. But he is also a highly versatile, 50% as a free safety, 30% as a box, 20% as a slot. And his allowed reception percentage has decreased every year for the last 4 years. He's now in the neighborhood of Kyle Hamilton, like in that high 50s, low 60s% allowed range. And that's included, being in that same secondary, seeing more targets because teams are throwing away from Sauce. And, if you're worried about his help in the run too, he was top 10 in total points earned against the run as a safety. So he might be able to be in the range of, 2 years for 12 million, 6 million guaranteed. That was Brad's estimation at PFF. So I think, if it's just for getting him away from Josh alone, that's probably worth 6 or 7 million a year. So
I like it. I know obviously we talked about Jeremy Chin earlier. I don't know if that went up or down in likelihood after Rapp was brought back. I think you can make an argument that he's of a similar role. I think he's better than Taylor Rapp. So I certainly don't think there's any time where your decision making is based on, well, we already have Taylor Rapp, so we don't, I don't think that's a factor in how you do or don't sign anyone. But I do think that there's some similarity in the skill set there. I do think if we're looking at another, similarly when we did the Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer signings, where Hyde wasn't even the every down nickelback in Green Bay, and Poyer hadn't started coming into there. There's a guy that I know a lot of folks, Dave Tilton was the first one that I heard really going after him from the Chargers, Lohi Gilman. That's a guy that I think you could get similar to the Connor McGovern example where, hey, you could sign him to a deal this year that next year all of a sudden looks really, really good. And you sign him for 3 years and 15 million. And all of a sudden you're feeling really, really good that now you have a guy like that locked up for 2 more years at a reasonable price. So he's a guy there. I know you mentioned Darnell Savage earlier. I think maybe more of a Band-Aid guy would be Brandon Jones, but like Sara said, there's so many names on the safety market that, honestly, it's one of those spots where there's 6 or 7 guys where I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Yep, that one works too. Yep. Yeah, Mike Edwards, yeah, sure. Brandon Jones, yeah, go ahead, that's fine. There's just a bunch of guys where like, yeah, that probably works. And you pair that, like I want that and a draft pick, but if you give me any of those safeties and then draft a safety in the first 5 rounds, yeah, sure. Let's go see how that works, and we should be in good shape. Sara, any other spots or names that didn't come up yet?
Well, the only it's such a weird name, honestly. But once we got rid of Hines and Hardy, I was like, well, now we, what are we gonna do for a return, and then a return guy, and then at the same time, I'm like, we need someone to kind of back up Taryn. So I kind of started going through looking for people like that, and it led me to Green Bay again with Keyshawn Nixon. And I think that could be a very affordable deal. He's young still. I think he's like 26, 27. I think he's all pro last year or last 2 years, returning the football. So I like that, and then he can kind of step in for Taryn as a backup and as the slot corner, the nickel corner.
It's a great name. Really, really strong one. And I've been anxious the last little while where we've gone into multiple games where thankfully Taryn has ended up playing, but a couple of those games where we weren't sure if he was going to play, a couple of them from concussion risks. And it's really rare that like really informed, knowledgeable people on the team, you'd ask and be like, yeah, I'm not sure who Terrence backup is. I don't know. Maybe it'll be Cam Lewis this game. They tried Saran Neal before.
Yeah.
Oh, do you think one of the outside corners could shift in? Like, we just don't have a backup nickel on the roster. So whether that's a guy like Keyshawn Nixon, which would be great. There's a couple others in that realm floating around, or you draft a guy like, hey, just be the backup nickel and play special teams. That's fine. Like just have that be
the guy's role. I want that confidence as someone who's returned before, especially in the NFL. You can return in college and it's very different once you get into the NFL. So I kind of want that feeling of confidence, because I'll tell you, there's been a couple of years where I'm like, who's returning today? Who's returning? So.
And shout out our guy Chris Janke, who's fantastic. He's has more of our like historical practice squad names memorized than anyone that I know. Yep. He has been on the train of this is Jamarcus Ingram's year for a while, so I know I want to give Chris,
and he's a great player. And I'm glad that definitely for a backup, I like that he's still on the he signed the futures, didn't he?
Futures deal. I think he's one of those guys who would be like a Kingsley Jonathan, where like if we end up that like, oh hey, our 52nd, 53rd guy is Jamarcus Ingram, I think that's totally within the realm of possibility going into this year. Right now, we have a whole bunch of holes on the roster, so right now there's a whole bunch of people could be invited to come compete.
Yeah,
we'll see
I feel like we have at least 13 or 14 like almost like starter, or at least second. Well, not technically starter, but second string.
The significant snaps, like a serious chunk of snaps.
Available. Yeah, we need about 13 or 14 guys, so it's a big chunk.
Kevin, anyone else that we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, I think one position we haven't talked about, and there's really another one body situation. It's at running back. So I think the vet market,
Henry. So.
Yeah, like clearly Derrick Henry, like they're going to give double-digit millions.
I would not shut up. I would not shut up if we got Derrick Henry. I love Derrick Henry.
It would be so much fun.
2 years, 2 years,
Void years, make it happen. Yeah,
let's maybe add a void year or something.
I mean, why not? But if you look at kind of a younger version I had on my list, I think there are other names that are going to bring all these market down, like safety. You got Austin Eckler at the top, Swift, Pollard, Josh Jacobs. Is there a musical chair situation, Greg? I don't know. That happens here. There could quite be someone that is left out. Even J.K. Dobbins has shown some flashes at his price point. But I'm going A.J. Dillon. I think he's always been in a complimentary role. He knows what it's like to have someone in front of him with Aaron Jones. I think he's exactly what they're looking for. We've been pulling from Green Bay all night. I don't know why. It is what it is. 2 years, $6 million, something along those lines. I just think there's too much money to be spent at running back. And there's a lot of forgotten guys. He didn't have the world's best year either, but he's still good. And he still does a little bit of everything. And I think he's just kind of the perfect thing of what they've been looking for. 6'2", 247. I mean, I just think he's a great compliment. I don't think he's going to cost a ton of money. I think they can make the numbers work.
I think that role is spot on. I think Dillon is absolutely the kind of player they could talk about. Two other options, very similar. Gus Edwards is another one that I could see. Deontay Foreman is another one that I could see. I think there's a younger version of Latavius Murray. The idea of what they probably thought Damian Harris was going to be prior to his scary neck injury, and all very reasonable. If you give any of those guys, hey, here's a little bit more than the minimum, you get $2.5 million a year or something like that. I think there's a good chance one of those guys takes it. I don't I don't expect them to spend money at running back. Brandon Bean has shown us for a couple years in a row here. They have cobbled together very competent, very capable
Good Ty
backfields
Johnson.
without spending
Mhm.
money. I think Ty Johnson's going to be invited back for sure. And I think he will compete and push for a roster spot. Somebody put it here in the chat. If I ask you guys, like, who's older between Gus Edwards and Ezekiel Elliott, Gus Edwards is older than Ezekiel. Like, Ezekiel Elliott is weirdly young. And I think that he's, now that the shine has come off of what people thought he would be and what he was in his peak in Dallas, I think it dropped so far that, like, he's still a rosterable player. Like, he's going to contribute on an NFL roster. I won't be excited about signing Ezekiel Elliott, but
Yeah.
if they do, like, in the same way that Latavius Murray had some big
I
moments
just feel
for
like
us,
he needs so many reps in order to have that breakout moment. Like in his yards in the last year in Dallas, I think it was like 3.8 yards per carry.
It was
And
rough.
it was, and he needed those added reps in order to still get the yards that he had. He won't get those reps with Cook in front of him. So I
think
feel like he
some of
ran
what
into the
he's
same
shown-
situation last year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And in New England, he ended up
It's
having
Stevenson.
some moments where he's still excellent in pass protection. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's still decent in short yardage, but he's not anyone who's going to be a consistent contributor to what they do. And he's about to turn 29. So, I mean, there's still plenty of shine there. I think that initial list, again, short of something really surprising happened with the Saquons and Derrick Henrys and Ecklers.
I can't believe how many running backs
were in any of those spaces, but Josh Jacobs and Tony Pollard, like, there's so many out there that I guess somebody could lose that musical chairs. I expect it to be that list of Dylan, Gus Edwards. Yeah.
What about Moss and
I think
Singletary?
Eckler
Are they out?
Eckler is going to be the one that loses out on those top guys. I don't think Eckler will sign anytime soon.
Yeah,
so
and
I think he's the kind of the cutoff.
He would be surprising just because there's so many similarities in the skill set with Cook that I would like to see a bit more of the, like, short yardage jackhammer type guy.
I'm not saying. I'm saying just teams in general. I think that if we kind of go from the top level to the bottom and like to the mid level of running backs, I think he's going to be the cutoff. But I think it's going to be a while before because he thinks he's worth more than I think that he is.
Both that running back safety market, that aging pass rusher. I think there might be more than usual this year, stretching out into the summer, going into where those things are.
And Clyde Edwards-Helaire too. I mean, with the link with Brady,
had his best season when it was at LSU with Brady. Chris, anyone else that we didn't touch on that was on your list?
The fallout from Black Wednesday has kind of set some of my free agent and draft expectations askew. I'm not sure what we're doing anymore. It seems we could go so many different ways now after all of those cuts. And one guy that I've just started looking at more recently is Dalton Risner, left guard from out of Minnesota. And probably a little bit more expensive. Probably going to be around $5 to $6 million a year.
He sat out there a long time last year too.
Yep.
What's funny, Chris, is like you have this is now because you had also said Dorrance Armstrong.
Yep.
You've said several of the same people as I have. Yep. He's on my list, and so is John Runyon for guards.
Nice.
Oh, so
that's another name that makes sense.
Well, yeah. And so there, he's the. I'm not sure how much stock you guys put into the shuttle numbers for the guards, but that's one of the combine drills that has been shown to be a little more sticky than usual.
Actually does correlate to success.
Yeah, so like it's 4.47, in the shuttle, and Risner's he didn't make the cut, but it's really close. It's 4.52 for his shuttle number, and I think there could be some McGovern-like potential there where he comes in and is given a couple of solid players on either side of him, and maybe you get a little bit more out of him than what's been there before. And also, nothing against David Edwards, but I also really enjoyed him in that, sixth man role. as the
As our
kind of
third tight
the
end.
heavy offensive line. Yeah, our third tight end, the heavy O line. Like, I'd be okay with him staying in that role and bringing in somebody else to compete for that spot too.
Very, very good. All right. So as we close out here tonight, I got one fun one just to ask everybody. We've seen all kinds of different versions of this over the last couple of years. We've seen, Being After Dark. We've seen all the different fun things. When do you guys think the first transaction of free agency is going to take place from Brandon Beane and the Bills? Not the stuff was already been announced, but like the first new name of a signing that's been added. Sarah, how long do you think Bills fans are going to have to wait?
Are you going to acquire it to be? Are you going to acquire it to be after the actual start of free agency? So it has to at least be after 4:00 on Wednesday, or
no. The first breaking news from a Schefter or Pelissaro or anyone like that. So, which any of those can happen officially tomorrow at noon.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be. I don't think it's going to be something big. It might be a smaller signing or one of our own re-signing. But it's always going to be after 10 p.m. because they don't like us to sleep during this week. So probably, I'm going to say 10:47 tomorrow evening. We'll get something, but I have a feeling it'll be more so like one of our re-signings than us going out and doing anything crazy.
They'll wait till Wednesday for Derrick Henry.
They're not gonna pay 6 to 8 million, and I feel like he's gonna probably get 6 to 8 million. They're not gonna.
I'm gonna be really annoyed when he goes to Baltimore because I don't really want him to go there, but it just seems way too easy for that to happen. Kevin, what is your over under of when the first breaking news name associated to the Bills is announced?
So I think Justin Jefferson will be announced at about 1:05 is about what I have down on the clock. But I do think he's going to jump the market. I do think that maybe they've been looking at some stuff, and maybe it is just a re-signing of maybe it's an Epinesa. But I think that something is going to happen right around the start. I'm going 2 p.m. I think that they do get. I do think they get active. Maybe some of the restructures will break. That's not quite. That doesn't quite count.
2 years ago? I think it was like Frank Gore was the first announcement that came up. It was Frank Gore at like 3 p.m, and that was the first announcement that happened. So it could be a really fun or exciting one like that.
Yeah, I'm going pretty early though. I think he gets active. No one said big names, but I think he's going to get active. And he's going to try to scoop up some of these names like a McGovern and others before we get busy. And I think that's where they start.
Chris, what's your guess?
Well, the film room goes live at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, so around 5 p.m. on Tuesday. If we're going to get
usually right after Anthony and Eric have already done all their prep, then something really big happens, and they have to scramble and redo all of it. So that would check out. That would check out. I will say, last year, 2 years ago, the Von Miller signing happened right before Aaron and I went live, and that one was a crazy one to go. So I do agree. I agree with Sarah's logic. I think it might not be the most exciting name. I'll go a little bit earlier than 10:40, but I do think there might be a lot of those like, hey, Brandon Beane, do something tweets all day Monday. I think it might be like 7:45 or something like that on Monday that we don't see anything for a little while, and he gets people anxious before he starts getting some of the actual momentum going.
Yes, and as a point of order, sorry, go.
No, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, as a point of order, like I trust everyone to not be tweeting out the Joker, "Here we go" at noon tomorrow. Like, you're better than that, okay?
I am totally scheduling that right now.
You can all do better than
schedule that tweet immediately. Thank you guys. This was a ton of fun. Really appreciate that. The chat was awesome today. Appreciate all the people chiming in. It's going to be really, really exciting. I don't think we're going to be shopping at the luxury end of the free agent pool here, but I do expect a fair amount of additions. The number of openings that Sarah referenced is very, very real. We have spots that need to be filled. I do think they're going to be looking to the draft for some people to contribute, but they're not looking for that many draft picks to come in. We are going to sign some people who are going to come in and start and are going to contribute immediately. And some of those are going to happen here in the next couple of days. So I do expect a mix of re-signings from guys who are previously on the team. I do expect some new names to be added and maybe a sprinkling of a couple exciting names. I think some of them might end up being some.
We just got an Eric Armstead cut, so hey, throw him in the mix.
Yeah, while we were on the show here, the San Francisco 49ers just ate like an absurd amount
Yeah.
of dead cap to release Eric Armstead as
mean,
a
whatever.
free agent.
Crazy.
Yeah. And it sounded like he was kind of forcing the issue a little too. Like
Yeah,
from a couple
I think
things
they
I saw,
could
it's like,
reach
oh, that's
agreement
weird.
on an extension.
Yeah.
They had done a pretty big restructure last year, which kicked a lot of money down the
Wow.
road. And if I'm
As
reading
much
it right,
as
they're eating like 26
yeah,
million in dead cap
as
to
much as
release
we
him?
say, you know, Diggs can't
Wild.
be gone and Vaughn couldn't be gone, I can't.
Yeah.
I will never say can't anymore, especially with
Yeah,
the you know
seriously.
the post June
Some of
1st
the
Yeah.
numbers
designation.
teams are eating are crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
the influx this year with the cap kind of ballooning that they're willing
Mhm.
to eat it this 1 year. So
Yeah, it certainly seems that way. Well, again, thank you guys very, very much. Make sure you check out both Sara and Kevin's shows on Buffalo Rumblings and Built in Buffalo. You can find more of Chris's work helping us with our One Pass memberships over here at Cover One. All kinds of fun things going on here. But on behalf of Sara, Kevin, and Chris, I am Greg Compsett. You've listened to the Greg Compsett Sports Show, and we are out.